and we're going to be signing a very important deal today. It's DOGE, billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse.
No question of anything but the fullest support.
I think it's very important, and that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt.
The traditional allocation of executive responsibilities has always been so determined as to liberate the ministerial incumbent from the administrative minutiae by devolving the managerial functions to those whose experience and qualifications have better formed them for the performance of such humble offices, thereby releasing their political overlords for the more onerous duties and profound deliberations which are the inevitable concomitant of their exalted position.
The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get. They're going to get what they voted for. And that's what democracy is all about.
But surely you don't intend to tamper with the democratic rights of freely elected local government representatives.
It's about simply having sensible checks and balances in the system itself to ensure that taxpayer money is spent well.
Ridiculous. Laughable. Out of the question. Joke.
Our cultural heritage has to be preserved.
Transparency is what builds trust, not simply somebody asserting trust. So not somebody saying they're trustworthy, but transparency so you can see everything that's going on.
No, Minister, I beg you. A basic rule of government is never look into anything you don't have to. And never set up an inquiry unless you know in advance what its findings will be. To that end, I recommend that we set up an interdepartmental committee with fairly broad terms of reference so that at the end of the day we'll be in a position to think through the various implications and arrive at a decision based on long-term considerations rather than rush prematurely into precipitate and possibly ill-conceived action which might well have unforeseen repercussions.
It's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. And if the government is not borrowing as much, it means that interest costs decline. So everyone's, the mortgage, their car payment, their credit card bills, anything, their student debt, the monthly payments drop. That's a fantastic scenario for the average American.
But that's unheard of. Do you really think it's necessary?
I mean, will I end up as a moral vacuum too?
Oh, I hope so, Bernard. If you work hard enough.
Makes me feel rather downcast. If it's our job to carry out government policies, shouldn't we believe in them?
What an extraordinary idea.
Why?
I have served 11 governments in the past 30 years. If I'd believed in all their policies, I would have been a stark, staring, raving schizophrenic.
So I think that is the root cause of our failure as a country, is this unelected fourth branch of government. And I think they look at elected officials as these cute little puppets that come and go every little while. Not anymore. There's a new sheriff in town. Donald Trump's the president. He has mandated us for radical, drastic reform of this federal bureaucracy.
Government isn't about morality.
Really? What is it about then?
Stability. Keeping things going. Preventing anarchy. Stopping society falling to bits. Still being here tomorrow.
What for?
I beg your pardon.
What is the ultimate purpose of government, if it isn't for doing good?
Minister, government isn't about good and evil. It's only about order or chaos.
At a high level, if you say, what is the goal of DOGE, is to restore democracy.
Democracy recognizes that you need a system to protect the important things of life and keep them out of the hands of the barbarians.
If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, if the bureaucracy is in charge, what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. The public's elected representatives, the president, the House, and the Senate, decide what happens, as opposed to a large, unelected bureaucracy.
Once you create genuinely democratic local communities, it won't stop there. Once they get established, they'll insist on more power. And the politicians will be too frightened to withhold them, so you'll get regional government.
So we'd have much less power.
Well, I don't know whether I really want power.
Bernard, if the right people don't have power, do you know what happens? The wrong people get it. Politicians, councillors, ordinary voters.
But you can't have an autonomous federal bureaucracy. You have to have one that is responsive to the people. That's the whole point of a democracy.
But it's ridiculous. It's unheard of. It's out of the question.
Why?
But the whole idea is, it strikes at the very roots of look, it's the beginning of the end. The thin end of the wedge. There is no reason to change a system which has worked so well in the past.
But it hasn't.
But you might create a dangerous precedent.
You mean that if we do the right thing this time, we might have to do the right thing again next time? I mean, on that philosophy, nothing would ever get done at all.
On the contrary, many things must be done, but
nothing must be done for the first time.
No.
If you asked looked at the founders today and said, what do you think of the way things have turned out? Well, we have this unelected, fourth unconstitutional branch of government, which is the bureaucracy, which has, in a lot of ways, currently more power than any elected representative.
Yes. I do see that there is a real dilemma here. In that, while it has been government policy to regard policy as the responsibility of ministers and administration as the responsibility of officials, the questions of administrative policy can cause confusion between the policy of administration and the administration of policy. Especially when responsibility for the administration of the policy of administration conflicts or overlaps with responsibility for the policy of the administration of policy.
People have voted for drastic reform of the government, and our federal government is broken. It's no secret that it is a fourth branch of government, the administrative state that makes most of the rules, that creates a federal bureaucracy that's hampering our economy.
They're public-spirited citizens, selflessly sacrificing their spare time.
Have you ever met any?
Occasionally, when there was no alternative.
Half of them are self-centered busybodies on an ego trip, and the other half are in it for what they can get out of it.
Perhaps they ought to be in the House of Commons.
A $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt.
Not necessarily.
It's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking.
Why?
If that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country.
I implore you to stay out of the minefield of local government. It is a political graveyard.
But excuse me, Sir Humphrey, you cannot have a graveyard in a minefield. Because all the corpses would...
At a high level, what are the two ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from 2 trillion to 1 trillion? And it's really two things: competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half.
Where did you get that preposterous idea? It's not my job to care. My job is to carry out government policy.
Even if you think it's wrong?
Well, almost all government policy is wrong, but frightfully well carried out.
You know, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. You know, that's a case where, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess.
Oh, how can you say such a thing? Subsidy is about education, preserving the pinnacles of our civilization. Or hadn't you noticed?
At a high level, if you say, how do we increase prosperity, is we get people to shift from roles that are low to negative productivity to high productivity roles. And so you increase the total output of goods and services, which means that there's a higher standard of living available for everyone. That's the actual goal.
Oh dear. It's impossible.